Imagine this: your sister shows up at your door, broken and lost, begging for shelter. You let her in, thinking you're saving her, but what if the real danger isn't her past? It's the quiet way your perfect life starts to crack. One rainy night changed everything. Stick around to find out how. The night was quiet except for the soft sound of rain tapping against the kitchen window. Sarah sat at the table with a cup of tea growing cold between her hands. Her phone buzzed. When she saw her sister's name, Emily, she answered right away. "Sarah," Emily said, her voice shaky. "Can I stay with you for a while? Just until I figure things out." There was something in her tone, exhaustion, heartbreak, maybe both. Sarah didn't ask too many questions. "Of course," she said gently. "Come whenever you're ready." After the call ended, Sarah stayed seated for a moment, staring at the rain. She could already picture Emily's tired eyes, a forced smile, the same way she looked every time life got too heavy. It had been years since they lived together. But Sarah still felt protective of her little sister. David walked in from the living room holding a book. "Who was that?" "Emily," Sarah said, rubbing her temples. "She's coming to stay with us for a bit." He nodded without hesitation. "She's always welcome here." Sarah looked up at him, the man she'd been married to for 6 years. Patient, calm, always willing to help. There was comfort in knowing he meant what he said. But still, something about the thought of her sister moving in unsettled her. Not fear exactly, just a small weight pressing at the edge of her heart. That night, as they got ready for bed, David asked quietly, "Is she okay?" "I think so." She didn't say much, Sarah replied. "Probably another fight with her ex-spy?" "She'll be fine here," he said, pulling her close. "You two need each other." Sarah nodded, but she didn't fall asleep easily. She lay there in the dark, listening to the soft rhythm of rain on the window, thinking about Emily. They had always been close, growing up, sharing clothes, secrets, dreams, but time and distance had changed them. Sarah had built a steady life, while Emily's path had been messy, full of broken starts and sudden endings. She turned on her side and looked at David, his face calm in sleep. She wondered what he'd think of Emily now, the same cheerful sister he'd met years ago, or a woman carrying too much sadness in her eyes. Sarah sighed, reminding herself this wasn't about comparisons. Emily just needed family, that was all. The next morning, Sarah cleaned the guest room. She opened the curtains to let in the gray light, changed the sheets, and placed a vase of white lilies on the bedside table. She wanted it to feel like a fresh start. David peeked in. "Looks good," he said. "She'll appreciate this." "I hope so," Sarah replied, tucking in the corners of the blanket. "She's been through a lot." When Emily arrived 2 days later, it was just as Sarah imagined. She stepped out of her car wearing a long gray coat and a tired expression. Her eyes looked like someone who hadn't slept in days. Sarah ran out to meet her, pulling her into a hug. "Hey," Sarah whispered. "You're home now." Emily smiled weakly. "I missed you." David came out to help with her luggage. "Welcome back, Emily," he said warmly. "Let me get that for you." "Thank you," she said softly. "I brought it inside." The house smelled like coffee and rain. Sarah watched as Emily looked around the framed wedding photo on the shelf, the throw blanket on the couch, the life that had quietly grown between Sarah and David over the years. Emily smiled faintly, but Sarah noticed her hand brushing her necklace nervously, like she was holding back tears. They sat down to dinner that night, roast chicken, potatoes, and the kind of meal that made home feel real. Emily didn't eat much at first, but she laughed when David told a story about how he once tried to fix the washing machine and flooded the laundry room. For a moment, Sarah saw her sister's old spark again, that bright, unguarded laugh that used to fill their childhood kitchen. After dinner, Sarah made tea for both of them and sat by the window. "Do you want to talk about it?" she asked gently. Emily shook her head. "Not yet. Maybe tomorrow." "Okay," Sarah said. "Take your time." Later that night, when Sarah walked past the guest room, she saw Emily sitting on the bed staring at her phone screen in silence. Her shoulders were tense, her eyes distant. Sarah wanted to go in to comfort her, but something told her to give Emily space. So she just whispered, "Good night," and closed the door quietly. Back in their bedroom, David was already lying down reading again. "How's she doing?" he asked without looking up. "She's trying to hold it together," Sarah said, sitting beside him. "She's hurt, but she'll be okay." David closed his book and reached for her hand. "We'll make sure she feels safe here." "You," Sarah smiled. "You always say the right thing." He shrugged. "Just trying to be a good brother-in-law." But something about the way he said it made Sarah's heart ache. Not because she doubted him, but because she suddenly realized how much she wanted everything to stay balanced. She didn't want pity or awkwardness. She wanted warmth, normalcy, family. Over the next few days, the rhythm of the house shifted. There were new sounds, the kettle boiling earlier than usual, soft footsteps in the hallway at midnight, quiet music from the guest room. Sarah didn't mind, though. It was comforting in its own way, but she also noticed small things she hadn't before. The way David went out of his way to make Emily laugh at breakfast, or how Emily's face brightened when he complimented her cooking. It wasn't flirtation, not even close, it was just kindness. And yet Sarah felt something stir quietly in her chest. One evening, as the three of them sat watching a movie, Emily suddenly said, "You two make marriage look easy." David chuckled. "It's not always easy. Trust me." Sarah smiled, but stayed quiet. She could sense the loneliness behind Emily's words, a longing not just for love, but for peace. After the movie, when Emily went to bed, Sarah stood by the window again, looking at the rain. It was still falling steady and endless. David came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist. "She's going to be okay," he whispered. Sarah nodded. "I know. I just hope we're doing enough." "You are," he said softly, and in that moment, Sarah felt both comforted and uneasy. Comforted because she trusted him, uneasy because something about the situation felt delicate, like a fragile line she couldn't quite see, but knew she had to protect. As they turned off the lights and climbed into bed, Sarah glanced toward the hallway where Emily's door was closed. She whispered a small prayer under her breath, not for herself, but for both of them. That night, she dreamed of their old home by the lake, the three of them laughing under a summer sun that never set. But when she woke up, the rain was still falling, and she couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning of something that would test them all. And yet, deep in her heart, Sarah knew she had done the right thing. Inviting her sister in was an act of love. She just didn't know yet what kind of love it would reveal. The first week after Emily moved in felt peaceful. The house was livelier, filled with soft laughter, the smell of coffee in the mornings, and the kind of warmth Sarah hadn't realized was missing. Emily had always been the kind of person who brought energy wherever she went, even when she was hurting. But beneath her calm tone and polite smiles, Sarah could sense the sadness that lingered like a shadow behind her sister's eyes. David noticed it too. One Saturday morning, as Sarah folded laundry, she overheard him talking to Emily in the kitchen. His voice was gentle. "You don't have to rush to feel okay," he said. "Just take your time." Emily's reply was quiet. "I'm trying. It's just hard starting over again." Sarah paused at the doorway, listening. There was nothing wrong in their voices. No tension, no awkwardness, just kindness. And yet something about the way David listened made Sarah's heart stir. It wasn't jealousy. It was something more complex, like realizing that empathy itself could be intimate. She walked in, smiling lightly. "You two sound serious," she teased, breaking the moment. David smiled. "Just giving your sister some of my world-famous advice." "Oh, world-famous," Emily said with a laugh. "You're very confident for someone who once glued the toolbox shut." They all laughed and the tension dissolved. For a moment, it felt simple again. Family, laughter, comfort. But later that day, while Sarah was painting in her small studio, she caught herself thinking about the way Emily had laughed. It had been a long time since she'd heard that sound from her sister, and she felt proud that her home could be a place of healing. Days passed quickly. Emily helped around the house cooking, grocery shopping, taking long walks with Sarah. Sometimes David joined them when he wasn't working, and the three of them would walk by the lake at sunset, their reflections glimmering in the water, but small changes began to show. David, who usually kept to himself after work, started spending more time in the kitchen when Emily cooked. He'd help chop vegetables, tell stories, make her laugh. Sarah didn't mind. In fact, she liked seeing them get along. But sometimes she caught herself watching them from across the room, wondering if they knew how in sync they looked when they talked. One night after dinner, Emily said softly, "You two have something rare. It's like you understand each other without speaking." Sarah smiled, touched by the compliment. "We've had our ups and downs," she said. "I used to have that," Emily whispered almost to herself before everything fell apart. The air grew quiet. Sarah reached out and squeezed her sister's hand. "You'll find it again, Em." "You will," David nodded. "You just need someone who sees you for who you are." Emily looked up, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "Thank you," she said, her voice trembling. "I didn't realize how much I missed being around people who care." That night, after Emily went to bed, Sarah and David sat on the couch. "She's healing," David said quietly. "But she's fragile," Sarah replied. "She's always been soft-hearted. I just don't want her to feel like a burden." "She doesn't," he said. "You've given her peace." Sarah smiled at that, though a small part of her wondered how much of that peace came from her and how much came from him. The next few weeks unfolded gently, like a rhythm that felt both comforting and uncertain. Emily started working remotely, spending mornings typing by the window with a cup of coffee. David often passed by, checking if she needed anything. Sarah noticed, but she told herself it was fine. He was just being kind. Still, there were moments that made her pause. One afternoon, She came home early and saw them outside fixing the garden lights together. Emily was laughing as David handed her tools, their sleeves rolled up, faces lit by the setting sun. It was an innocent scene to people helping each other, but it stirred something deep in Sarah's chest, a mix of warmth and unease. That night, she couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about how kindness can sometimes blur into connection. She trusted David completely, but she also knew how pain could draw people together in unexpected ways. She told herself she was overthinking, but the feeling stayed. A few days later, Emily offered to help Sarah at her design studio. It was a small place downtown full of sketches, color swatches, and soft music. "You're amazing at this," Emily said, looking around. "I can't believe how far you've come." Sarah smiled. "Thanks. You used to help me draw when we were kids." Emily laughed. "Yeah, you'd make me color all the boring parts." They spent the day working side by side, and for the first time in weeks, Sarah felt completely at peace. It reminded her of who they used to be before life got complicated. Just two sisters creating dreaming. When they got home that evening, David was cooking dinner. "Look at you," Sarah teased, hanging her bag. "You're spoiling us." "Only trying to impress my favorite critics," he said with a grin. "Careful," Emily said playfully. "You're setting a high bar for husbands everywhere." They laughed, and for a moment the house felt perfectly in sync again. But that night, when Sarah looked at David as they got ready for bed, she noticed a quiet distance in his eyes. Not coldness, but thoughtfulness. "Everything okay?" she asked softly. He smiled faintly. "Just thinking about Emily. She's been through so much. I just hope she finds herself again." "She will," Sarah said, though she felt that achy again, the one that whispered there was something delicate about their new balance. "She's strong. She just forgot for a while." He nodded. "You're right." Then he kissed her forehead and turned off the light. As Sarah lay awake, she thought about how love changes shape over time, how it can grow, stretch, and sometimes make room for others to heal inside it. She trusted David. She loved her sister, and she believed in what they were building together. Still, she couldn't help but wonder if some connections, even innocent ones, carried silent echoes of longing. The next morning, Sarah found Emily in the kitchen, humming softly as she made pancakes. The smell filled the air, warm and sweet. "You're up early," Sarah said. Emily smiled. "Couldn't sleep, thought I'd make breakfast." David walked in moments later. Smiling at the sight, Sarah felt a quiet shift again, subtle, unspoken, but real. There was lightness returning to Emily's face, warmth in David's eyes, and something fragile in Sarah's heart that told her the story of their home was slowly changing. It wasn't about jealousy or suspicion, it was about the strange beauty of love in all its forms. Sometimes helping someone heal meant letting your world expand a little, even when it made you uncertain. As the three of them sat down to eat, laughing over burnt pancakes and spilled syrup, Sarah looked around the table and realized something important. Love wasn't always about grand gestures or perfect balance. Sometimes it was about quiet mornings, shared laughter, and trusting that the bonds between them, fragile as they were, could still hold. And yet deep down she sensed that life was moving towards something she couldn't name. Something that would test how much trust truly meant. By the time autumn settled in, the air around the house felt calmer. Emily smiled more often now, her laughter easier, her movements lighter. The gray in her eyes had softened into something warmer. Sarah could see the change every morning when they had coffee together. Her sister was slowly finding her strength again. And yet, with every bit of Emily's healing, Sarah felt something inside her stir, something she couldn't quite name. It wasn't jealousy, it was more like a quiet tension that lived beneath the surface. She loved Emily deeply, but watching her come alive again, especially around David, filled Sarah with mixed emotions she didn't know how to process. David had been patient and kind through it all. He had kept his promise to be there for Emily. He helped fix her car, took her grocery shopping, even listened to her stories when Sarah was busy at the studio. Sometimes Sarah would walk in and see them talking in the kitchen, soft murmur of their voices blending with the sound of rain or the hum of the dishwasher. It was ordinary, but there was something delicate about it. Something that made Sarah stop and take a quiet breath before joining them. One evening, Emily sat on the porch, staring at the fading light. Sarah found her there wrapped in a blanket, eyes distant. "Rough day?" she asked. Emily nodded. "Some days I wake up and feel fine. Other days it's like I'm walking through fog." Sarah sat beside her. "You're doing better than you think." "Oh, I don't know," Emily said quietly. "Being here has helped me, but it also reminds me of everything I lost. Seeing you and David, how gentle you are with each other. It hurts sometimes, in a good way, but it still hurts." Sarah's chest tightened. "You'll have that again, Em. You just need time." So Emily looked at her sister, eyes full of quiet pain. "Do you ever worry it could fade, that kind of love?" Sarah hesitated. "All the time," she admitted softly. But I've learned that love isn't about staying the same. It's about choosing to care, even when life gets messy. Emily nodded, tears glinting in her eyes. You're lucky, Sarah. That night, Sarah couldn't shake her sister's words. She found David in the living room reading as usual. Can I ask you something? She said, sitting beside him. He set his book down. Of course. She took a slow breath. Emily is trying so hard to move forward, but I think she needs more than just space. She needs kindness. The kind only you seem to give so naturally. David frowned slightly. What do you mean? I mean, talk to her, said gently. Encourage her. Make her believe she's still worth loving. You're good at that, David. You always have been. He looked hesitant. Sarah, are you sure? I don't want to make things awkward. She smiled, her voice calm. I trust you. You've always known how to help people heal, and she needs that right now. He nodded slowly. Okay, if that's what you want. It is, she said, though her chest felt heavy. She's my sister. I just want her to feel whole again. From that night on, David did exactly what she asked. He started spending more time with Emily in small, thoughtful ways. He'd ask her how her day was, listen to her worries, give her advice when she needed it. Sometimes he'd make her tea in the evenings or join her for short walks by the garden. Sarah watched from a distance, always proud of his kindness, always aware of the quiet connection forming between them. Not romantic, but human, tender, full of understanding. Emily began to change even more. She started smiling for real, not just pretending. She talked about finding a new job, maybe even moving to a new city. I think I'm finally starting to believe I can have a new beginning, she told Sarah one morning. Sarah felt genuine joy. You deserve it, Em. You've come so far. Emily hugged her. It's because of you. And David, you both gave me something I didn't know I needed. As Sarah smiled but felt a lump in her throat, it wasn't that she regretted asking David to help. She didn't. But watching them interact sometimes stirred emotions she didn't expect. It was strange to feel both proud and protective, both comforted and uncertain. One afternoon, while cleaning up the kitchen, Sarah overheard them talking in the living room. Emily's voice was soft. You and Sarah are lucky. You've built something strong. It's rare. David replied gently. It's not luck. It's choosing each other even when it's hard. Do you ever get tired? Emily asked. Off marriage, he said with a faint smile. Sometimes everyone does, but love isn't about avoiding tiredness. It's about resting together and starting again. There was silence after that, not an awkward one, but full of unspoken thoughts. Sarah stood still, her hands resting on the counter, realizing just how deeply David understood love. She had always known he was steady, but hearing him say it made her heart swell with quiet gratitude. Later that night, Sarah joined him outside as he watered the plants. Thank you, she said softly. He looked at her. For what? For doing what I asked, she said. You've been good to her. He nodded, a gentle smile on his face. She's a good person. She just forgot her own light for a while. Sarah's eyes softened. You helped her see it again. David put the watering can down and turned toward her. You did too. Sarah, you were the one who opened the door. She smiled faintly. Maybe, but I think it took both of us. In the weeks that followed, the house began to feel lighter. Emily started going out more, meeting friends, laughing without hesitation. The heaviness that once hung in the air slowly lifted, but there was still a quiet awareness between Sarah and David, an understanding that they had walked through something fragile together and come out stronger. One evening, while they all sat watching the sunset from the porch, Emily said softly, You two have no idea how much this has meant to me. You gave me back hope. Sarah reached over and took her hand. You gave it back to yourself, Em. We just reminded you where to look. Emily smiled, her eyes shining in the golden light. Still, thank you. When Emily went inside to pack a few things, David turned to Sarah. You knew exactly what she needed, he said. Sarah looked at him, her eyes filled with quiet emotion. No, you did exactly what I asked. You showed her that love can still be gentle. He took her hand and squeezed it lightly, and you reminded me why it matters. As the last bit of sunlight faded, Sarah leaned her head on his shoulder, feeling a calm peace settle over her. She had worried that helping her sister might strain their marriage. But instead it had revealed something deeper, the quiet strength of love that doesn't fear sharing warmth, the kind that grows when it gives. And though Sarah didn't say it out loud, she knew in her heart that sometimes the greatest proof of love isn't in holding tighter, it's in trusting that what you share is strong enough to let others heal beside it. The wind picked up softly that night, carrying the faint scent of rain. Sarah looked toward the window where Emily's shadow moved in the light and whispered to herself, He did exactly what I asked, and somehow it brought all three of us back to life. The morning Emily decided to leave, the sky was clear and soft with sunlight. The house felt unusually still, like it was holding its breath. Boxes sat by the door, her suitcases neatly packed. The sight of them made Sarah's chest tighten. It was strange. The same sister who had arrived lost and broken was now standing strong again. Her face calm, her eyes bright. Sarah had known this day would come, but knowing didn't make it easier. The weeks they'd shared had changed everything, not in dramatic ways, but in quiet, lasting ones. Their little house had become a place of healing, of tears, laughter, and reflection. Now it was time to let go. Emily stood by the kitchen counter holding a mug of coffee. "I don't know how to say goodbye," she said softly. Sarah smiled gently. "You don't have to. Just say see you soon." David came in from the garden, wiping his hands on a towel. "The car is ready," he said, his tone steady but warm. He gave Emily a reassuring smile, a kind that had helped her through the hardest nights. For a few moments, none of them spoke. The air between them was filled with quiet gratitude and unspoken emotion. Sarah looked at her sister, her hair tied back, her posture straight, her heart finally at peace. She looked like someone who had learned to stand again. "You sure you want to go today?" Sarah asked softly. "You could stay another week?" Emily shook her head, smiling faintly. "If I stay longer, I might never leave, and I think it's time." Sarah nodded, though her throat tightened. "I'm proud of you, Em." Emily stepped closer and hugged her sister tightly. "Thank you for giving me back a home when I didn't have one. You never lost it," Sarah whispered. "Was always here." When Emily pulled away, her eyes shimmered with tears. Then she turned to David. For a second she hesitated, as if unsure what to say. He saved her from the silence. "Take care of yourself," he said softly. "You deserve good things." Emily smiled through her tears. "You reminded me of that. Thank you for seeing me when I couldn't see myself." David's expression was gentle. "Anytime, Emily." Sarah watched the exchange quietly. There was nothing inappropriate in it, just mutual respect. A bond built through kindness and patience. Still, it carried weight, a silent understanding that this chapter had changed all of them. When Emily finally drove away, Sarah stood at the door long after the car disappeared down the road. The wind brushed her face, and she felt the ache of both loss and relief. David stepped beside her and placed a hand on her shoulder. "You okay?" he asked. Sarah nodded slowly. "I think so. It just feels strange, doesn't it? Like the house is too quiet." He smiled softly. "It'll take time to adjust." They went inside together. The living room was still Emily's favorite blanket folded neatly on the couch, her empty teacup still on the table. Everything felt slightly incomplete, as if the air itself remembered her laughter. That evening, Sarah lit a candle by the window. She sat on the couch staring at the flame. David joined her, sitting close but silent. For a while, they just listened to the faint hum of the world outside. Finally, Sarah spoke. "You did exactly what I asked." David looked at her. "You asked me to help her." "Les," she said softly. "And you did. You gave her hope." He reached for her hand. "We both did. Sarah, you opened the door. You made space for her healing. That takes courage." Sarah smiled, her eyes glistening. "I was scared sometimes, not of you or her, just of what it might change. But I think it changed us for the better." He squeezed her hand gently. It did. They sat together in silence for a long time, the soft light flickering against their faces. Sarah leaned her head on his shoulder, and for the first time in months she felt completely calm. Over the next few days, life slowly returned to normal. The house was quieter, but it wasn't empty. It felt peaceful. Sarah returned to her studio, throwing herself into her work while David tended to his garden again. Sometimes, when the wind blew just right, Sarah thought she could still hear Emily's laughter echoing faintly through the house. One afternoon, Sarah found an envelope on the kitchen table. It was from Emily. Inside was a short note written in her neat handwriting. "Dear Sarah and David, thank you for reminding me that love still exists. Not just the romantic kind, but the kind that holds you when you break and lets you go when you're ready. You gave me back more than I can ever repay. I hope one day I can do the same for someone else. With love, Emily." Sarah read it twice before showing it to David. He smiled softly after reading it. "She's going to be okay," he said. Sarah nodded. "She already is." That evening, they had dinner outside under the fading sky. The air was cool and the world felt steady again. Sarah looked at her husband, really looked at the lines near his eyes, the calm in his smile, the quiet loyalty that had carried them through everything. "I think what happened reminded me of something," she said. "What's that?" "That love doesn't shrink when you share it," she said softly. "It grows. I was afraid of losing something when I invited her in, but instead I found more." David's expression softened. "That's the thing about love. The more you give, the more it multiplies." Sarah smiled, resting her head against his shoulder. "I'd invite her in again," she whispered, "because it reminded me of what kind of love we have." He turned his head and kissed the top of her hair. "A love that trusts," he said quietly. They sat there until the stars began to show, the night settling around them like a soft blanket. There was no drama, no tension, just peace. The kind that comes after a storm, when everything broken has found its way back to being whole. In the weeks that followed, Emily called often. She had found a new apartment, a small place near the city. She sounded happy, excited, even like someone finally ready to start again. "You too saved me," she said over the phone one evening. Sarah smiled. "You saved yourself. We just gave you a place to rest." But after hanging up, Sarah turned to David. "She's happy. I'm glad," he said simply. "She deserves it." Sarah nodded, then looked around the house, the soft glow of the lamps, the scent of the lilies by the window, the quiet hum of life that continued. It wasn't just a house anymore. It was proof that love could be shared without losing its strength. That trust could hold even when tested. That kindness could heal wounds words never could. That night, before going to bed, Sarah whispered a silent thank you to Emily, to David, and to life itself. She realized something profound. Letting love in, even when it complicates things, can still lead to peace. As she drifted off to sleep beside the man she'd chosen every day for 6 years, she thought of her sister driving through a city full of lights, smiling again. And in her heart, Sarah knew the truth. She had invited her sister in, and her husband had done exactly what she asked. He had reminded them both what love really meant. And in that quiet, ordinary way, they had all been healed.